Chapter 14. Priest 2. Lionel's senses were like sparks running through his body. He could feel his reactions increase again, reaching 0.93. With another dodge, he entered the 2-meter radius of the priest, swinging downward with all his might. His controlled strikes are interrupted when he has to form a shield but if the shield is made, it can sustain itself for a period while he creates the next star. A sharp, reverberating strength traveled through Lionel's body as his silver rod violently crashed against the priest's barrier. It was painful, but his body was resistant. The glow in his eyes only grew fiercer when he saw the barrier give way a bit. The priest's next shot was at point-blank range, but Lionel's reactions were too quick. The former's arm had only barely twitched when Lionel shifted his body, dodging the next strike. At such a close distance, the controlled shots had become meaningless. With their poor agility, if Lionel timed a dodge well enough, the priest could end up hurting himself. He can only shoot these strikes of energy from the hand wielding his dagger. But is that true? Or is it superstition? When he threw the girl over, he clearly used a hand without the dagger in its tots. The priest's arm suddenly shot forward. Maybe believing that his shield would be down soon, he preemptively struck, his strength soaring past his base stats once again. But Lionel was ready. With the priest's poor coordination, catching Lionel off guard was too tall a mountain to climb. At the same time, however, the priest was more clever than Lionel gave him credit for. The instant his arm punched toward Lionel, another strike of energy was sent forth. Except this time there was no 2-second wait like Lionel was expecting. Caught completely off guard, Lionel's eyes widened in shock. In those split seconds, he managed to tell that the strike was shooting forward at a speed of 0.94, and it was completely impossible for him to dodge. That dagger, it can charge and store attacks too, shit. Lionel managed to shift his shoulder out of the way of the priest's punch, but the flash of energy barreled into his left hip, treating Lionel's armor like scrap metal and fracturing his hip bone before its strength dissipated. A cold breath rushed through Lionel's teeth as he spun like a top. He had never felt such excruciating pain in his lifetime. He was certain that the him of just a few months ago would black out in an instant. If he has another one, Lionel's heart trembled. But luckily, even with his vision growing foggy, he could sense the priest gathering energy once more. Whether it was because his dagger's ability had a timer, or because he didn't feel it was necessary to use it again, or maybe because he couldn't, it didn't matter. With a wince, Lionel collapsed to the ground, but he had already pulled out another atlatl. All this time, the priest had completely forgotten about his ability to throw. How could he not? Lionel made a big show of throwing his atlatl away as though it was useless to him. Those action made the priest completely miss the fact that Lionel had 3 more to his right hip, and just now he just so happened to have landed by one of the darts the priest blocked when he first entered this place. As for whether it was by coincidence or no, if someone asked his best friend James, he would emphatically choose not. Lionel took control of his senses, forcefully sealing the pain in his hip from traveling to his brain. Rolling over, he plucked the damaged dart from the ground and fitted it into his atlatl. By the time the priest noticed that something was wrong, it was already too late. He was in the middle of conjuring another energy strike, and he would have to cancel it in order to form a shield. But that singular second was all Lionel needed. With a roar that expelled every drop of energy he had left, Lionel balanced himself on his only good hip and butt, angling his torso up as he finally threw his first full-force spear toward the priest. The speed was blinding. It was as though a line of brown had been drawn from Lionel's arm to the priest's neck. The splintered wood of the dart lodged into the latter's throat, causing a fountain of blood to rain down as the priest collapsed, his dagger falling along with him. Seeing this, the last bit of will that held Lionel together collapsed. He fell back, a familiar pain returning to his left hip that almost made his eyes roll back. He knew he couldn't stay. The Mayans had gone out to fight, but there was no telling when they'd be back. He needed to move. Has the quest ended? Send me out of here. Nanya Mawan. Yes, sub-dimensional zone detected. Mayan tomb. Spanish invasion. Sub-dimensional zone grade. CC. Clear requirements. Enter Chief Priest's sacrificial room. Complete. Save Chief Priest. Failed. Oh, for fuck's sake. It can't be that they won't teleport me out because I failed, right? If he had the strength, he would definitely smash this watch now regardless of the consequences. Breathing heavily, Lionel rolled to his right again. He found his silver rod to his side and gripped it. Using it as a crutch, he slowly pulled himself up, relying on his one good leg. He slowly made his way to the dead priest, pulling the fallen dagger to his side and wasting what must have been at least a good 10 minutes picking it up. He didn't know how it worked, or if he could even use it, but he knew it held some power in the eyes of the Mayans, without a doubt. Maybe if they came rushing here, he could scare them away with it. Finally, Lionel hobbled to the still naked girl who sat dazed on the ground. Now that the fight was over, his teenage hormones seemed to want to kick in. She was truly a beauty with delicate brown skin, though it was now covered in bruises and scrapes. She should have been around 20 years old, so though she was young, she still held a maturity to her that too easily swayed boys as young as Lionel. However, Lionel snapped out of it, trying his best to avert his eyes from her most treasured places, though she didn't seem to care anymore. "Are you all right?" Lionel asked. The moment he did, he started kicking himself. She couldn't understand a word he was saying. What the hell was wrong with him? If Aina saw him babbling like a fool here, she'd never talk to him again. The young woman seemed to shake out of her daze, looking up at Lionel from her seated position as though shocked he was before her. Still, what shocked her even more was his kind gaze. She hadn't seen such a thing in a long while. Even her own parents had only looked toward her with sadness and grief after they learned she was the chosen virgin for the chief priest's sacrifice. Though Lionel's face was mostly obscured by his metal helmet, it was still the best she had seen in a long time. She re-entered her daze for another long while as she recalled what happened. Looking toward the priest's dead body, her body suddenly started to tremble. Her breath quickened, her breasts undulating beneath the far too fast beating of her heart. Lionel snapped out of his embarrassment and bent down with a worried expression. "It's all right. You'll be fine now." Lionel knew she couldn't understand him, but he hoped that a soothing voice would do something. However, what he didn't expect was for his heart to stop beating completely when her gaze met his own next. It was an inhuman gaze. A reddish, devilish stare that looked like a madwoman intent on seeing the world burn. She shrieked, lunging at Lionel's neck with both hands. No matter how quick Lionel's reflexes, with almost one half of his body being completely useless, and with how close the two were, there was absolutely nothing he could do. A sharp pain shook Lionel's body as he fell to his back. The breath was knocked out of him as he gasped in shock. But he noticed a second later that he couldn't breathe. His throat was completely sealed by this seemingly frail girl. She was almost like a rabid dog, snarling and screaming as she squeezed with all her might. It was as though the only wish she had in this world was for Lionel to die. Lionel was in shock. Hadn't he just saved her? What was she doing? Even if she didn't thank him, she shouldn't be trying to kill him, right? Lionel's eyes reddened both due to a lack of oxygen and a slowly building anger. He didn't have to step out and save her life. In fact, his quest didn't ask him to anyway. Because of her, months of toil and pain were completely wasted, yet she was trying to kill him. How dare she? His silver rod and the dagger still gripped in either arm. All Lionel had to do was drive the dagger into her rib cage. Just like that, she would be dead and he could breathe again. His hand raised, his emotions bubbling over, but that was when his gaze met hers again. He could see them. The tears falling from her eyes, the sheer desperation. He could even faintly see the glint of his knife in the corner of her eye, something that made him certain she saw it. All she had to do was drive her knee into his shattered hip and he would probably lose himself to pain, unable to do much of anything. Yet, she did nothing. It was as though she was hoping he would just end her life. Lionel felt his vision blackening, his dagger still raised in the air. His hand trembled. He knew that her delicate skin wouldn't be able to last even a split moment against the sharp edge of the blade, yet he couldn't bring himself to do it. His hand fell back to the ground, his body finally succumbing to his injuries and lack of oxygen. As his consciousness faded, he could only see a sea of black. Maybe this is just what I deserve. Side quest. Defeat 1,000 Spaniards. Complete. AI. Reward pending. In his last moments, this was what he thought of. Defeat. What a nice way to put it. In reality, he had slaughtered them all. Were they fake? Lionel could no longer fool himself into believing this. The emotions that colored that girl's eyes saw, they were too real. He could almost peer into her soul and see through her secrets, Her insecurities saw. How could they be fake? Oh, today's my 18th birthday, Leonel thought. I guess I'm an adult now, right? You don't have to feel bad about my death then, Dada. You officially finished raising me. I'm no longer at your responsibilities. Leonel no longer had the strength to form any more thoughts. So, he slipped away. The naked girl sat over his torso in a daze, looking from Leonel's handsome face into the dagger he hadn't used and back again. Now that his helm had been knocked off in his fall backward, she could see him clearly. She was stunned to find that he was even younger than she was. The tears that fell from her cheeks grew into a torrent, her savage shrieks turning to maddening sobs until she collapsed, unconscious. It was then that a white light enveloped Leonel and his body disappeared. Quest cleared. Subject Leonel Morales being sent to On. The wristwatch's mechanical voice cut off. Clearly, wherever Leonel was headed, it had no ability to exist. Chapter 15. Rewards 1. Leonel was beginning to see a new pattern in his life that he wasn't very fond of. Battle to the point of death. Fall unconscious. And finally, wake up without knowing where the hell you were. Once again, Leonel found himself in a similar situation. Except this time, it was even weirder than appearing atop a Mayan temple, if you could believe it. He sat on the ground, or what he perceived was the ground, in a blank, white space. If it wasn't for some kind of gravity telling him which way was down, he would have a hard time distinguishing just which direction was which. To make matters weirder, it was hard to tell if the ceiling was a centimeter from his head, or if it was miles away. Was there even a ceiling? He wasn't sure. However, maybe it was due to his ability, but Leonel found that he adapted quite quickly. Soon, that feeling of disorientation faded, and he began to slowly stand with the help of his silver rod. Hold on, Just when Leonel was feeling that the process was too easy, he realized that his hip was no longer broken. In fact, he felt better than he ever had in his entire life. The only discomfort he felt in his hip was due to his deformed armor pressing into it. Without much of a choice, Leonel took it off. He wasn't sure where he was, and equally unsure if he still needed to be alert. But this armor was no longer any good to him in this state. Wait on. Why am I alive? Unless I'm not. I'm not. This sort of white space. Wasn't it just like every stereotype of heaven he had ever read about? Maybe he really was already dead. Leonel sighed. After unbuckling his armor, he set it aside. He really did smell quite terrible, but after so many months it had stopped bothering him as much. His sweat pants and compression shirts hadn't lasted, so he was currently wearing so odd leather pants he snatched from a dead soldier. His chest was fitted with chainmail, but other than that it was bare. To sum it up, he was a mess. My scars seemed to be gone too. The number Leonel had accumulated were definitely not few. His body had become a canvas of bullet wounds and blade scars, but they had vanished. Oh? It's quite rare for someone to regain their bearings so quickly in this place. The sudden voice snapped Leonel out of his own thoughts. His tension still running high, his neck practically broke off from his torso turning toward the sound, his silver rod and dagger being gripped tightly. Whoa. There. It wouldn't be the first time someone attacked their guardian, but I'd prefer not to be added to that list, please and thanks. A handsome man that seemed carved of precious stone had appeared a few meters from Leonel. He was more perfect than any human should have been. Leonel had a hard time believing that he was anything other than an ascended being. He somehow managed to wear a gold-plated armor without looking absolutely ridiculous to a man of the modern era like Leonel. Guardian? Yes, the man said. It's my job to hand you the rewards you've earned in your sub-dimensional zone. In return, I receive a bit of karma. Karma? The man waved his hand. Guiding a baby isn't part of my job description. With that, the man unfurled a golden scroll. Maybe it was due to whatever it is he read, but he froze for a very long time. He seemed to be speaking English, but his lip movements were nothing like English. Something is translating? Leonel thought to himself. First to clear a subdimensional zone in your world, huh? Not Bada? Oh, that's unfortunate. It seems that someone skipped ahead and took the world's spirit for themselves, or else you'd have a right to a fourth of it. Shame! Your world has 8th dimension potential. Its world spirit should have great talent, not bad. A third-dimensional world that can create rudimentary sub-dimensional zone analysis technology definitely has a bright future ahead of it. Just who couldn't? Oh, the man's brows raised as though he saw something amusing. Is Morales your maternal or paternal name? Ah, paternal. I see. Excuse me, sir. Are you saying that my reward should have been this world spirit, but someone else took it? You could say so. But it's less about the world spirit being taken away and more about it choosing its master. You shouldn't feel that it's unfair. It can only be said that this person is more gifted than you are. Or rather that's not definitive. After all, this world spirit was taken even before you were born. Also, being the first only nets you a reward of a chance to gain the world spirit's recognition, and the equivalent of a fourth of its power. Many worlds still have the power of their world spirit split into 4. Passed down through generations of the same clan. Not that that matters much to you. Now. Oh, I see. Entering a Tier 4 black-ranked sub-dimensional zone on your own for your first try? With a pseudo-fourth-dimensional world's constitution for a body? You must be insane. Lionel opened his mouth to answer, but he couldn't make heads or tails of what the man just said. His watch ranked the world he entered a grade C. How did that translate to this man's ranking system? It was a Tier 4 black-ranked zone meant for 4 people. What the hell is wrong with you, kid? No wonder it took so long for me to fix you up. Leave these kinds of things to youths born in higher dimensional worlds. It's my job not to be prejudiced against you, but I'm giving you advice. Your world has a lot of potential, more than mine by a good margin. Take your time and stop rushing things. Lionel was shocked by the care in the man's voice. It seemed out of place, or maybe he was just a good guy, or was just fond of his accomplishments. But he could still only smile bitterly at the man's words. He hadn't known anything before he stepped in. Plus, his father had implied that he should enter. How could he know his old man would send him to his death? All right. I'll stop nagging you. Sir, can I ask your name? My name is Montez. Thanks for the advice, Uncle Montez. I'll do my best. Montez blinked in shock for a long while before he laughed heartily. Uncle it is then, Your rewards are clearing both side quests, activating the hidden quest, completing the hidden quest, clearing the objective. I cleared the objective? I thought I failed all. You would have had you killed that little girlie, but it seemed you didn't. Lionel's face twisted with a weird expression. What kind of quest was that? Wouldn't it go on forever then? The quest objective was to repel the Spanish and save the girl. Lionel's expression darkened. The wristwatch told him to save the chief priest. What kind of sick joke was this? Had he known the true objective, he wouldn't have gone into the sacrificial room without a plan because he would have deduced the priest would be his toughest enemy. If he was prepared, he wouldn't have ended up in such a sorry state. Montez began to laugh, eventually wiping tears from his eyes. I told you it was rudimentary zone analysis technology. How could it be completely accurate? Lionel took a deep breath. Before my rewards, do you mind explaining 2 things to me? What exactly are sub-dimensional zones and how does the ranking system work? Well, I'm normally not allowed to explain these things, but I think I can get away with it this time. Zones are key points in history which connect your 3rd dimension to the 4th. Due to a sort of buffer the universe has, these dimensions were stored in time, so that they couldn't influence the timeline too much. In order for your world to successfully evolve to the next dimension, these instances in time must be resolved. If they are not resolved, they will begin eating away at your timeline, altering important events in history until your world is unrecognizable. If the problem becomes severe enough, your world could collapse. Lionel's eyes widened. He hadn't expected the problem to be this severe. So I'm guessing, the reason why you hire worlds help us little guys out is so that one day you'll have more help with clearing your own subdimensional zones. Monte couldn't hide his mouth hanging open in shock. Yes, that's exactly right. It's in our best interest to unite in this matter. A world with as much potential as yours will receive a lot of help. In fact, there should be a lot of influences from other worlds in your own already. You're quite a smart boy, but I really can't say much else. Influencing your timeline too much can have its own poor effects. To answer your second question, black zones are assigned to 4th dimensional events, bronze to 5th, silver to 6th, and gold to 7th. My own world is only of the 7th dimension, so I don't know much more. Lionel had many more questions. Like the man had mentioned world potential before, and even said that Earth had the potential of an 8th-dimensional world. On top of that, he said that Earth had more potential than his own world. But if that was the case, and his world was already of the 7th dimension, shouldn't his world's job be done? Since there was no hope in reaching the 8th dimension for them, why did they still help lower worlds? And if his job wasn't finished for some unknown reason, wouldn't his 7th dimensional world be facing 8th subdimensional zones right now, just like Earth, as a 3rd dimensional world was facing 4th subdimensional threats? So why did he not know anything about zones above the gold grade? There seemed to be a secret here that was nagging at Lionel's heart. But he knew better than to ask. Each rank of black to gold is divided into 9 levels, 1 being the lowest and 9 being the highest difficulty. In addition, the chosen difficulty is ranked by how many are allowed to enter as well. The zone you completed had an entry limit of 4, since it was relatively stable, and could support that much influence without collapsing. But you completed it alone, so it was more like a Tier 5 black zone to you. Montes clapped. All right, that's enough. I wasted much of our time together with too many words. I'm sure you know by now that the reward system is separate from the zones. It's something us higher worlds created. Only silver and gold zones can form rewards of their own, kind of like that dagger in your handage, though. That dagger will disappear once you leave this place. That's the difference between low-grade zones and higher-grade ones. Lionel couldn't help but inwardly smile. Every time Montes swore he couldn't tell Lionel anymore, he would continue to drop tidbits of helpful information. Either way, since this is a 4-person zone, you can normally choose 4 Tier 4 black rewards for a minimum clear. But, since you completed the hidden quest, that's good for a Tier 5 black reward. Including the 2 side quests, the clearing 100 Spaniards reward is another Tier 4 black reward. Clearing 1,000 is a Tier 5 black reward. I also have to factor in the fact you were the first of your world to clear a zone, and that's worth a Tier 9 black reward. So, 5 Tier 4 black rewards, 2 Tier 5 black rewards, and 1 Tier 9 black reward. You are allowed to trade down by handing in a higher tier for 3 lower ones. You can trade up by using 5. Don't ask why it's like this, people at the top are misers. Montes clapped his hands. A moment later, a counter filled with treasures Lionel was practically blinded by appeared. Maybe the most shocking part was the fact this counter extended for hundreds of meters to the left and right.